Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk about Ready Rating. We do preparedness presentations free to the public, and we're currently offering them virtually. We also do youth preparedness, where we have youth programs that we also are offering virtually right now. Therefore, from everything from kindergarten through 5th grade. Just getting the kind of culture of preparedness to be ingrained both in children as well as adults, because Dennis is a disaster responder as well, and we see the devastation when people aren't prepared. So we'd much rather people take these precautionary steps in order to prevent, death, injury, as well as huge financial loss.
Disasters is really not a question if they're going to happen. They are going to happen. It's just really a question of when and how severe are they going to be. We're going through one right now with our pandemic. And unfortunately, the news is not good. FEMA has basically estimated that if a business is closed for more than 5 days, 40% of those will not reopen. And an additional 25% will fail within 1 year. As we're seeing that happen already, a number of businesses have declared either bankruptcy and they're not going to reopen, or they're in the process of bankruptcy. So, another statistic from FEMA is that 75% of businesses without a continuity plan will fail within the first 3 years. And so it's pretty bad news. And so the conclusion is that you need to be prepared for when that next emergency is going to occur, which we're all seeing that so happen. So on the next slide, we'll see that basically to be prepared, that there are 4 things you need to do. You need to have a plan. You need to communicate that plan so everyone is aware of what they need to do when. Then you need to practice it. Just like, when I was growing up, I grew up in Kansas. We would practice, fire drills. We'd practice tornado drills. And so you have to practice. Unfortunately, today the schools are practicing active shooter, but people need what to do, and then you need to continuously improve. Okay, so today what we're going to look at, our agenda is to talk about what are some potential types of disasters that can occur, the consequences of those disasters, and then we're going to talk about a tool, a hazard and resource vulnerability assessment. So basically how we can determine what types of disasters are likely to occur, then the steps involved in developing an emergency action plan, and then we're going to go over a template that the Red Cross has developed for the Ready Rating program, their EPA template, okay? So let's first then look at types of disasters that can occur. And there are just a variety of disasters that can occur. They can be from natural threats, whether it be earthquakes or flood or wildfires. And we're actually in the wildfire season right now, so you need to be prepared for that. It can be caused by humans, some type of accident that might cause a fire. Someone might slip and hurt themselves. Some act of violence might occur, or terrorism. Then we can have technological, such as an electrical blackout, which is most likely to happen within the next 18 months for almost everyone. Hazard material spills and so forth. And then finally, as we're all too aware, there can be pandemics that can occur. Okay, the next slide. So what can happen when we do have a loss? Well, obviously it can affect people, your employees and your customers, where there can be all the way from a minor injury to basically loss of life. And we need to be to handle those different situations. The same thing with it might cause us to lose customers. Our facilities and our equipment, our buildings, we can actually lose all of them. A fire might wipe them out. An earthquake might wipe them out. And then, of course, an important loss today is information, where you either get a cyber attack or something happens, you lose information. All of these can result in some type of financial impact. Where you can lose business, it can be injuries, you can be sued, they can be, then of course, then you can have your reputation. So basically, when a disaster does happen, it can be very serious, and you need to be prepared to be able to handle that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So what we want to be able to do then is to make some type of an assessment to determine what's likely to happen and how severe it can be. So and that's a hazard and resource vulnerability analysis. Basically what occurs is we need to ask what can happen, how likely is it to happen, and what are the likely consequences. In the chat box, there should be a link to where you'll be able to get a copy of the Red Crosses. And so what we're going to do, we're going to go through an example, but you should be able to get this through the chat room to where you can download all of it. So on the first column, then we're going to list potential types of disasters. And there are just a number of disasters that can occur. And we just simply have four of those here. So then the likelihood of occurrence, what we want to do is to rate each event from a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 means it's not likely to happen and 5 means it's very likely to happen. So for us, and on the West Coast, hurricanes, not likely to happen. I don't think there's ever been a hurricane. Now, tsunamis, again, pretty low, but no hurricanes. So we would rate a hurricane as 1, whereas a fires are very likely to happen. And so that needs to have a 5. Hazardous materials, that depends on your workplace. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. So basically, the likelihood of occurrence from 1 to 5, low to high. The impact of life. So how serious can be? Is someone likely to die or be seriously injured from this? Again, we rate that. Because hurricanes, again, are not the issue, but a fire, people can die. So we need to rate that a 5. The impact on facilities and property. So, could we lose building? Could we lose equipment? And again, we rate those. The impact upon business operations, is it likely to hamper or even prevent? Again, if they have a fire in your building was to burn down, you would not be able to operate that particular, facilities. Okay, the business operations, can you operate? And then the impact on dependencies. That deals with, will it impact employees? Will it impact your distributors? Will it impact your customers? So you need to rate that. So the purpose of this vulnerability assessment is basically to rate each factor. Then at the last column, we total those. This will give you a sense of where you need to put your attention. So for example, hurricanes, very low, but fire is very important. So basically this tells us where do we need to focus our attentions. To this scale, it's going to be either earthquakes and fires that we need to pay the most attention to. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So then, in order to handle this, we need to have an emergency action plan, an EAP. Basically, this is an outline that tells us what courses of action that we need to take before, during, and after a disaster. And we want to be able to develop a plan to take care of those. Basically, an EAP is required by OSHA. If you have more than 10 employees, it has to be a written document that's shared. If you have under 10 employees, you don't have to have it written, but it has to be written. So every organization by OSHA is required to have one. Okay, on our next slide, we can see what the goals that are required of what we're wanting to accomplish with our emergency action plan. First and foremost is we want to protect our people, whether it be employees, customers, guests or visitors who might be there, and just the general public. So it's all about protecting people. It's also about making a business become aware of what are their critical assets. What do they need to be able to stay in business so we can do that? Again, ultimately, the purpose is then to have your business continue operation and not be one of that 40%. Okay, our next slide. And so the process of developing an emergency action plan. First is the assessment. And we've done a little bit, but basically what you want to do, you want to identify the critical assets to your business. What is it that you need to stay open, and since, what can you not live without if you're going to do your business? A good classification to use is to classify it by people, places, and things. So who are the key employees that you need to have? What building and or equipment do you need? And what type of data is important for you able to do that? Okay, the next slide, the second aspect of our assessment is like, what are the possible disasters? What's likely to happen? That's where we do that hazard assessment. It'll tell us that. What are the likely consequences? and what's the probability each of those disasters happening. So those all come from our hazard assessment. But then that next step is to determine, okay, how prepared are we for each of those assessments? And then we come to that real crucial decision is, what level of risk are you willing to accept? And so your actions can involve doing nothing to, taking steps. Now, we can never be prepared enough. So you kind of have to make this assessment in terms of what is it we need to do to protect our people, to protect our assets within a reasonable amount that's taking place. Okay, so then let's go to some more aspects of then actually developing. So we do the assessment, now we need to develop our plan. From a very broad, high level, first of all, we need to assign responsibility. If you do not give someone responsibility for thinking about disasters and emergencies, it's not likely to be done. If you can, the best thing to do is to form a team to where you can have a group of people who basically that is their responsibility, where they're going to be handling that. From there, you can establish your goals. The goals will be based upon your hazard assessment. Basically, what are those key disasters that are likely to happen, and how do you protect yourself from that? And then with that, then you'll be able to develop your budget. Okay, let's go a little more specifically then to the next slide. And so, okay, so the specifics of that is the first thing we need to do is make a plan for our workers. What should they be doing during and after a disaster? So basically, do they stay in shelter? Do they evacuate? Do they go to a central point? And different types of disasters will require different types of activities. Obviously, if there's a fire, you want to evacuate the premises. A hazardous spill, you just want to evacuate that particular area. If it's an earthquake, you'd want to have just an assembling point that you can go to. So basically, what we're trying to do is ask questions that need to take place. For example, another question that needs to be asked is, who's going to provide a first aid? If someone were to, God forbid, cut off a finger, what are you going to do? If someone has a heart attack, what are you going to do? And who's going to stay that? So you need to basically have a plan to handle your people. Okay, the next slide. In addition, then that we need to have a communications plan. The communications plan is going to tell us, what needs that. So how do we notify people that there's a disaster? And how do we tell them the difference between a fire versus an active shooter? So we need to have different types of signals for different types of disasters. Employees need to do that. How do you notify your employees of that? How do you stay in contact with those employees? And how do you keep in contact with them? In addition, you need to know, how are we going to communicate with our vendors and our suppliers? Okay, then to do that. Okay, then the next thing is we need to have a plan for our systems and data. If you were to have a power outage, will you lose your data? If you were to have a cyber attack, what are you going to be doing with that? And then necessary location. So basically, what the EAP is trying to do is take you through a series of questions to have you think about different possibilities of what is it that you need to do to be able to handle that. Okay, then after we do our planning, the next step is then we need to actually implement it. And the implementation becomes a function of training. And on the Ready Rating program itself, it has different training exercises. It has different resources that you can use to help train. It has drills that you can actually use to go through to practice that. And so basically, if people just need to be reminded on at least once a quarter, to be reminded what is it that need to do in case emergency. And then finally, you need to do an evaluation of your current plan to be able to take care of that particular situation. Okay, so now I'd like to talk about the program that the Red Cross has. It's called our Ready Rating program. This is a free web-based self-paced emergency program. And so basically a lot of organizations think that developing an emergency action plan is a very expensive proposition. It doesn't have to be. So this program basically helps you organize and give you the questions that you need to go through. It's targeted and can be customized to handle different types of organizations. So suppose it's, you know, that's a little different for retailers versus manufacturers versus a service provider. So you can tailor design it to your, basically what the program does, it does an assessment where based upon your organization, it tells you what you need to do. The program meets or exceeds OSHA standards. As we mentioned earlier, basically you are required to have an emergency action plan. And so this program, if you go through this program, it will meet or exceed those standards. And as I said, you can customize it, individualize it to your particular needs. And what it does, it provides a basic template, and then you either add to it or subtract to it based upon the needs that you might have. Okay, let's look at the next slide, and we'll see then what are the requirements. What is it that an emergency action plan needs to include? So the first thing was the physical location. So if your organization has multiple locations, you need to have an EAP for each location because it's going to be different for every organization. So for every physical location you have, you need to have an EPA for that physical location. A second thing that's required by OSHA is the communications. So basically, how will people report that there's an emergency or if there's a fire? You know, we're going to call 911. Who calls 911? It's basically, you need to think through that. You need to talk about evacuation. So if you do have to evacuate, how will people evacuate the building? Another thing is going to then, who remains to take care of those critical functions? Who's going to turn those off? So for example, if I have to evacuate, am I in the office setting? Do I leave my computer on or do I turn my computer off? You need to think about those particular things. Another requirement is that you have some type of a system for identifying everyone. What's the evacuate? Because it's basically the safety people need to know, is there someone still in the building and how to take care of that. The fourth thing you need to be required is who is going to render assistance and how that assistance can be provided. Again, Red Cross provides all kinds of training for emergency and first aid types of facilities. And then finally, we'll deal with this. Any other considerations? For example, if you have hazardous materials, how will you deal with those hazardous materials that are designed for your particular type of business taking place? Okay, the next slide. So looking at the program itself, the Ready Rating program. And so Emerald, if we can go to that, the first one, the Ready Rating program itself. And so this will be the phase that you'll come to. And as you can see, just at the top of there, you know, they do have a resources section. So basically you can go into that and you can see that there are specific resources to help you. Some of these are white papers, some of these are videos, some of these are basically just things that you can use, and some of the exercises that you can use to help train your employees. Go down just a little bit on this slide, on the website there. And so we can see then it gives you an opportunity to sign up. It gives you an opportunity where you can do assessment. And then also it has where you can basically do your evaluation that's taking place. So I thought we had the coronavirus on that. Is that the next one? I thought it was on there. Is that?
Yeah, I think it's the next one.
It must be on the next one. So let's go to the template. And on that, and I'm going to give you ability to get into this, to try it on your own. Whoops. So I guess we're already logged in. But just in case if you need to get into this, I'm not sure what happened to our coronavirus one. I did that just to mention this to you. The Ready Rating program does have resources. on how to respond and act during the coronavirus. So I would encourage you to do that. So if you go to the program, you'll sign up, you'll be able to do that. If you want to play around with it, you can get into it by using the username RR123BIZ. And that will basically get them into it. And so the password and the username, the password, so it's all small letters, RR123biz. And so what we're looking at now is basically the template for the emergency action plan. And you'll see on the right, it kind of closes. But if we'll go and looking on the left there, it basically has the information broken down to different possibilities. And so in using this template, what we're able to do, it tells you what you want to, and it tells you what's mandatory, what has to be in there. It also tells you if you want to admit something. And looking at your emergency action plan, it can be as simple as a 3 or 4 page document, or it can be, maybe 100 pages for more complex organizations. But basically what this template does is it goes through and it basically gives you the questions that you need to be thinking about, and then it gives you resources to do it. So the process of using the Ready Rating program is you go in and you sign in. As we said, it's free, so you're able to sign up for it for free. Then it'll ask you to take an assessment. And there are 2 types of assessments that you can take. There's a shorter version that has about 30 questions that will take you about 30 minutes to do. And then that's for organizations that have very little planning at this point. If your organization does have an emergency action plan, is more detailed, then you can take a longer version that involves 60 questions that takes about an hour to do. After you do that assessment, it will provide you with next steps. It will outline for you what are the activities that you need to engage in. And it gives you resources to help you do that. Then you can get into this emergency action plan. And based upon that, it will tell you, again, it'll give you the questions you need to ask. You can include those or not include those into a situation. So it becomes a way, basically, to very painlessly and very quickly, very inexpensively, to be able to prepare your organization for those particular disasters that might occur. And so again, it doesn't have to be a complicated process. The process is there that it can take care of you to do the things that you need to do. Okay, so that's basically the program. I don't know if we have any questions anyone has that we need to answer. I would like to let you know that I am available, and Emerald's going to provide my contact information to you. So if I can be of help to you in terms of with the program, if you have any issues, I'll be happy to do that for you. So that's basically the program. Unless we have any questions, we can basically say disasters are going to occur. It's not a question that if you are required to have an emergency action plan. It doesn't have to be an expensive, time-consuming activity. Basically, the Red Cross Ready Rating program will allow you to protect your people, to protect your resources, and to help you stay in business.
Dennis, when you were talking, you mentioned the COVID-19 on Ready Rating. So I attached to a direct link in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, I know when we did a little practice earlier, it came up for some reason.
Yeah, it's on there. It's actually on the resources page that there's a link to the COVID-19 stuff, but I put both of them.
Okay, thank you for doing that.
Of course. Yeah, thank you. Dennis actually helped give one about wildfire preparedness just yesterday. So we're trying to get everyone prepared because the time is now. I think a lot of businesses don't realize or don't think that it's going to happen to them. And they think another day I'll do it. And then it's too late. Something happens and their business is destroyed, and their employees get laid off, and the business never reopens. And it can be complete devastation. So these are really simple tips. It's a free program. Red Cross just wants businesses to start planning ahead, because we are typically on the response side. So kind of getting that urgency for businesses to make a move now so they're prepared. So anything we can do to help make that happen, we'll happily do it. We can do presentations virtually, and we can even do one-on-one, question and answers. So we'd be happy to be available anytime.
Okay, great. Thank you. This was very helpful. I wasn't aware you had this other program, so the emergency plan. So
thanks for being here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And thank you for that. I think this is going to help foster an attitude of, being more proactive than reactive in these situations, Melissa and Dennis. So thank you guys so much for joining us on the call today. If you guys would like to stay tuned to chamber events, we'd like to invite you just to check out our website. For that, we are hosting most of those still on Zoom, through next month, but I can share that we're having one live in-person event happening in a couple weeks. So it is a very small scale event, and it is members only, but if you guys might be interested in attending, go ahead and reach out to me after. But we have a lot of members that are very eager to network face-to-face again in a safe environment. So we're happy to be able to provide that for them. So thank you again for joining us today. And once again, we'll send our contact info after the fact, so you guys have that and this recording. So thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care.
Thank you, Emerald, for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.